Hi, welcome to the Unrehearsed Verse Poetry Podcast. We've got my friend Morgan joining us today. Morgan, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, Bonita. I'm Morgan. I'm 28. I work in design and I'm from Swansea. And I guess my background, I'm mixed race, Puerto Rican and Welsh. So kind of a bit different. And I think maybe that experience kind of comes out a little bit for me in the poetry.
Amazing. So what is it that got you into poetry?
I suppose I think Wales kind of is a place of storytelling. It's kind of in the culture. I grew up playing a lot of sports, playing rugby and boxing, and that was always my thing. If I was feeling stressed, I would always play sport or I'd go for a run. And I was playing rugby at uni, and then I broke my hand. And then after I recovered, I broke my hand again, boxing. And I realized I actually needed something different then to be cathartic for myself. And I was struggling and I was just writing these thoughts down. They weren't poems at the time. And if I was, I felt sort of, it kind of started the same time I was journaling. And I just felt a lot better after sort of leaving the words on the page. But I've always loved the idea of being I suppose, a good storyteller and kind of painting a picture in someone's head with your words. And my grandfather's one of the best storytellers um, I've met, and I just love the idea of people on the edge of their seat for a story. And I suppose once I started writing, I really just sort of leaned into that then. I found it really cathartic, and I was doing it then because I just enjoyed it. Sort of where I am right now on my journey, I suppose.
So did you find that initially, because I know you said that you transitioned to poetry from rugby and boxing, were you finding it kind of a stress relief, like you were doing it to relieve that stress?
Yeah, um,
Yeah.
it was just, that was it in the first instance. It was just like putting a pressure valve on, and I didn't really worry. I can't even really say. I guess that probably some of my early things were like I'd say they're poems now, but at the time I I was coming from like a direction where it didn't seem like
Mm.
poetry, and even though I grew up reading a lot, I never really read a lot of poetry, so it was purely just putting my thoughts down. And I suppose as well, being dyslexic, I've always loved the idea of writing, but the idea of being a writer or a poet just seems absolutely ridiculous. If you're dyslexic, sort of how I grew up with perceptions of dyslexia, but that's something now I kind of like to turn its head.
Yeah. And have you noticed, just because obviously you've said that this started as a stress relief, but then obviously, I've read quite a bit of your poetry, and whilst some of it is about how you're feeling, other sections of your poetry are about situations and about nature. So have you seen like a shift through your poetry over time from where it started, where you didn't initially consider it to be poetry when you first wrote it, it was a reflection, to how it is now?
That's a great question. Yeah, definitely. I would say for me, poetry, it feels like a tool, and I think it's a tool
Yeah.
for everyone, and you can use it however you like. And I would say when I first sort of picked it up, it was just like, okay, I need to have some type of stress relief. And now, since I've just been enjoying it more, so I use poetry to sort of ground myself in a
Mm,
moment. That's what I'm really trying to capture is whether it's I'll use my own experiences, but
mm,
it could be I'm thinking of something in like a fictional context. I'm really trying to capture like a moment and a feeling. And I think that's what poetry is about a lot of the time for me is trying to, because we all have these moments in our lives, whether they're happy or sad, but they can kind of be lost to a memory. And I think
yeah.
that's something that I love about poetry is the idea of really bringing back that memory and something not being lost. But yeah,
That's something that I love about your poetry. Every time you've ever read me one of yours, it always feels like you capture a moment in your poem so beautifully. It's when you read it, the choice of words you've used, everything, it just all comes together. And every time I listen to you read me a poem, every time I feel like I can really feel how it was, how it feels to be in that situation, how that moment felt, whether it was a real situation in your life or if it was one of the fictitious ones that you've written. Every time I can really empathize with the figure in the poem.
strangely about my poems, I often think about that I can't really communicate is smell. So I think
Mm,
smell for me is a big one with memories. I think that's something that really, yeah, just I love that you said that it sort of like takes you to these places and because that's what a lot of it's sort of memories for me that I'm trying to revisit.
Do you feel like, so you've mentioned that you're dyslexic. Do you feel like that's had much of an impact in your poetry? Do you feel like that's come through in it at all?
Massively.
Yeah.
I would go as far to say I would probably never be a poet, even though I still feel strange for me to call myself a poet. I don't think I ever would be um, if I wasn't dyslexic, because I think dyslexia for me shapes kind of like my whole reality and how I see the world and how I interact with the world. And a large part of being dyslexic for me was being undiagnosed and going through the school system. And my work was fine, but I was always just slow reading. So to sort of get around that as a workaround, I used to, whenever we would read books, um, I would like go to the library, get the book, and then just read the book in my own time to try and sort of memorize it. So I wouldn't make mistakes in person then in class reading. And it was up until recently where did some public speaking. It was a massive fear of mine, even in my adult life, reading aloud. I think for the poetry, being dyslexic, then my mind, I just sort of realized it works slightly different to other people. And I also think the ADHD comes into that. I make maybe connections that, like, one thought before I even finish it, it bounces onto another one. And I think it all feels linked, these different ideas. And it can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, I think, being dyslexic, and writing to kind of get all these thoughts down while they're still going, and then to kind of
Mm.
zoom out and then to edit the words on the page and think, okay, what's the core of the story? Like how do I want my reader to feel? Where am I trying to place them? What type of emotions and journey am I trying to take someone on? But there's a lot of kind of random, all linked, but not necessarily linked to the theme I'm trying to capture. So yeah, I wouldn't say I love being dyslexic, but I suppose I do now because I think it just has brought me a lot of joy in life as much as it's brought me some trouble in school. You can't really do anything about living in a neurotypical world if you're neurodiverse, but it's brought me so much joy from reading and poetry, so I'll always be grateful for it.
It's really nice how you've reflected there on this dyslexia being something that was such a challenge in school and obviously the anxieties around reading out loud. It sounds like it was a big challenge and how that's now become such a tool for you. You've said that it's something that really helps you with writing these poems. It's something that, you said you wouldn't feel like you could write these poems without it. That massive shift and even the fear of public speaking in school to now where you regularly attend poetry nights and share. Not only are you reading out loud in front of a massive group, but you're also sharing such a vulnerable part of yourself in these poems. It's absolutely incredible seeing how that journey sort of come along with the dyslexia.
Yeah, I suppose with the dyslexia, it felt like kind of, if you think about riding a bike, all my peers were kind of off straight away on two wheels, and I had to use training wheels for ages. But it kind of feels like then maybe people got bored of riding a bike, and I had to spend longer riding a bike, and the
Mm.
training wheels came off, and I never stopped riding really, and I would say it kind of made me a stronger writer and reader down the line in dyslexia. The fact that I kind of had to spend so much time, because to actually overcome the challenge, the best way to do that is by doing something you enjoy. And it was the
Mm.
same for me. I had to create a way that was fun for me. And it's kind of just a real fun accident that I've sort of ended up here, I suppose.
Amazing. And so when you're sitting down and you're writing a poem, could you tell us a bit about the sort of creative process that you go through that leads it from being, in your head to the page?
Oh, yeah, it's quite fun. Sometimes I can feel like an absolute madman. Sometimes I'll just be on a run. I overheard someone humming a song, and it was the song Harvest Moon by
Mm.
Neil, I think it's Neil Diamond. And I was just thinking of that. And when I got back home, then it was sort of like a summer evening, and I was listening to the song, and I was already sort of had a problem with maybe understanding characters in the story I was writing. I just carried on writing then and exploring, like, the idea of like what this song could mean to someone. And because I have songs that take me back to certain times in my life, and yeah, it can be as random as hearing someone like hum a song, or if I'm feeling a lot of emotion, um it can almost start just as almost like a journal entry. And then,
Mm.
because I'm not at home, I normally like to write my journal, just because I'm dyslexic and lazy, I suppose. I hate the idea of copying something I've written. So I suppose a lot of my poems probably should start as journal entries on my phone. Then I kind of just roll with them, or if there's just something that really speaks to me, I really want to explore that. I've been really surprised that some of the poems I've shared with you that I thought were a bit rubbish, and you really enjoy. And I think that's always kind of surprising, but really exciting, because I
Mm.
think you just gotta write for yourself because you have the thought and you want to explore.
Mm.
I think I grew up with a fantastic family, and my mum was a single parent, and she was great and really encouraged me to be emotionally intelligent. But I still struggle to like cry, and poetry is like a healthy way to explore emotions that I was feeling. I think there's something really comforting in
Mm.
art, in that I hate saying my work is art. It's quite cringy. But I suppose if you've had extreme emotion or feeling in your life, there's something really comforting to me anyway in the idea that someone has felt this before, and it feels a little less lonely, especially um writing the poem about my grandmother. There was a lot of feelings then. I felt very alone.
Yeah.
I was surprised after I performed that it connected with lots of people, and it felt really good to do something like that, I suppose. I think there's a lot of comfort in different types of art, and I think kind of poetry kind of falls under that as well for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that you said just then is about how this is sort of a form of personal self-reflection. And so it's one of the beautiful things with poetry is it then means you can look back and you can see where you were at the times that you wrote all these different poems and what was going on through your head and stuff like that, such as the one that you're obviously going to share with us today about your grandparents.
Yeah, can I just go back on that point on like you saying how it's a good point of like personal reflection, because I think that's
Mm.
something massively that drives me to writing. Is I think
Mm.
with my ADHD, I kind of always forget once I'm out of a situation how I actually felt.
Yeah.
And when I'm like in a certain point in my life, I'll it's really hard to describe, but I just can genuinely say now if I'm feeling really happy and joyous, it feels like unbelievable because those emotions feel so far away. And it's the same then sometimes if I'm feeling really sad. I know, brighter days on the horizon, but I
Yeah,
feel like with ADHD, I can kind of get lost in how I feel and like things will pass. So that's something I think that's a massive driver for me to actually write is that because I can't remember, I want to remember because it was all real. And yeah, I think kind of the poetry for me, it's kind of like taking a photo of, my how I was feeling about something at a certain time. And that's a big reason, I suppose, why I like to write because I just forget and it feels I don't necessarily want to remember like all the tough times, but I think you can't have the rough without the smooth or I think the bitter makes the sweet.
absolutely. Amazing. So, would you be happy to share your poem with us now?
Don't know why. So this poem is called Villages and Market Town Jazz. I went to Brecon recently with a friend to listen to some jazz. 2 days after I returned home, I cried for the first time in a long while, writing in my journal. Some tears were happy, some were sad, others were from a grief that comes with guilt for feeling it early. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but I grew up in a single parent family, headed by my mother. My mother always had to work, so I spent a lot of time with my newly retired grandparents, who were perhaps some of the most significant members of that community that raised me. My nan, a not really retired cook, as she volunteered in our church and local MS centre, running their kitchens and coffee shops. Nan had a wicked sense of humour, enjoyed pranking people, taught me how to cook, bake, sew, dance, almost knit, and to my teacher's dislike to hit bullies back twice as hard. She had what she called asbestos hands. I watched her in awe as a child, as she handled blisteringly hot things with ease and precision in the kitchen. She loved cooking for people. She was our family's matriarch, the nucleus of our family catch-ups being big Sunday dinners, where sometimes she'd let me help by peeling spuds, her with a knife, me with a peeler, and somehow she'd always finish the spuds left in my bucket. My Bampy was a retired, former, unskilled worker, a labourer on the docks, and later a caretaker. Once he told me when he was a boy he wanted to be a carpenter, but the family didn't know any, so that was that. He had a slim build, but seemed the strongest man in the world for his frame, with thick, rough hands and wiry, sinewy arms, from years of climbing the cranes and working on the docks. He was a voracious reader, who I seemed to almost always sorry. He was a voracious reader, who I seemed to always almost instinctively disturb, just as he placed the cup of tea down, and thumbed his bookmark out of a page. He taught me how to write my name on a magnetic writing board, and I still write in cursive to this day. He took me to museums, where we'd spend hours wandering around, and I looking at artifacts with a curiosity and an imagination which he patiently encouraged. He had false teeth, and once in the busy gallery of the museum, I asked him why an Iron Age skull had more teeth than him before he hurried me along. I thought he was the cleverest man alive, and he seemed to know everything, and in a time before the internet, if he did know something, he would return with a book which he told me contained the answer. On the last Saturday of every month, in my Bampy's red Nissan Micra, we drive up the long winding roads that skirted alongside the mountains overlooking reservoirs to Brecon for an antiques fair in the market hall. Both of my grandparents were hard-working, supportive, humble people who were cautious of overreaching dreams. I can remember them being proud and supportive when I told them I had applied to university. The scholar! My nan proclaimed, but there was a quiet undercurrent of concern which they tried to mask beneath the surface of our shared excitement. We didn't know anyone who had been to university. At school, despite being the top sets for my subjects, many of my teachers were discouraging once I was diagnosed as dyslexic of any academic pursuit. As I got older, I spent less time with my grandparents, but for many years, on the last Saturday of every month, I joined my grandparents in my Bampy's red Nissan Micra for a day out in Brecon. We always took sandwiches, and times we had a bag of chips was a highlight and a special treat. Both loved a peaceful walk, and we spent many times walking along the canals and the river banks of the Usk. Brecon is a place that, curiously, I had not returned to since my childhood, until the other week. My grandparents stopped going to Brecon the summer before I started university. That summer, I spent hiking across France and Spain, walking El Camino de Santiago. My nan had another stroke that summer, but I found out when I came home but it actually happened 2 weeks before I came home. I was quick to anger I hadn't been told, but I later learned, despite my grandmother's deteriorated speech, she instructed all I was not to know, and to complete my journey, the Camino, a childhood dream of mine, which I did in ignorance of what awaited me at home. One of my previous favourite quotes that my Bampi had read to me once, soured in my mouth, a Charles Dickens quote, but it still holds true thinking of that homecoming. That was a memorable day to me, for it made great changes in me, but it is the same with any life. Imagine one selected day struck out of it, and think how differently its course would have been. I began to see my grandparents more, but this time the roles were unfamiliar and reversed. My nan had her second retirement from all of her volunteering, for good, after a diagnosis with dementia. My Bampi, in his 80s, became my nan's primary carer. I stood in my grandmother's place in the kitchen at first, and Nan joined me in my former place, and we cooked together, smiling, moving instinctively around each other like old times. I showed my Bampi how to cook meals my Nan had showed me as a boy, and how Nan liked her favourite things cooked. Now my grandparents haven't been to Brecon for years. Now my Nan never wants to leave home, and she doesn't like her favourite food anymore. Now my Nan still asks if I'm courting. I won't mention my ex-girlfriend's name. Now I don't see my family every Sunday. Now I've seen my Bampi cry for the first time. Now my Bampi seems so small and tired when he gives me a hug. Now my Nan can only dance when she holds my arms tight and not for long. Now my Nan asks how the scholars getting on at uni when my graduation photo hangs behind me on the wall where I'm sat. Now my Nan can't dress herself anymore. Now we don't make many memories. Now we talk, reminisce of the good times we shared. We laugh remembering Nan's pranks, like the rubber eggs she gave us for breakfast. Now I tell my grandparents stories of adventures I've had and of my weekends away. Now they both share a smile after I say, do you remember when we went to Brecon and they had the jazz festival that day?
That's an incredible poem, Morgan. Like, you've only read that one to me once before, and genuinely, I'm so grateful to be hearing it again, because there's so much more that I feel like I picked up on the second time hearing it. It's such a beautiful, reflective poem. The imagery that you create with that, like, throughout it, I can really see you there with your grandparents. I can really see all those beautiful memories with them. I can see your nan saying the scholar when you get into university. I can absolutely see her, and I think this is a poem that it's such a vulnerable poem for yourself, but I think anyone listening to it, I think it also touches that place in anyone that listens to it, where they will, look at their grandparents and that relationship they had with them and sort of reflect with it and connect with it. And the shift halfway through where your grandparents start to get a bit sick, I find the ending of this poem where you start going, now my grandparents haven't been to Brecon for years, now my nan never wants to leave home. That repetition really drills it in, and it creates such a shift. Like, I can really feel it resonating through me. And then the beautiful ending where you reflect back on such a lovely memory that you've got with them. I loved this poem the first time you read it to me, and I think I somehow love it even more now. It's absolutely incredible.
Thank you. I think one thing when I first wrote this, it was genuinely that I'd gone to the Brecon Jazz Festival for the first time in years, and the last time I was there, I was with my grandparents, and I had a great time. And it was really fun listening to the music, but it was such an intense emotional experience. I kind of was in two places. I was there in the moment, and then, thinking, reflecting on all these times with my grandparents. I had to just, because I was feeling so overwhelmed by these emotions, and reflecting on how, reality has changed for my family now. I just had to sort of like put pen to paper, I suppose, for the catharsis. I think what really strikes me about this poem now in reflection, I would say, is the word hiraeth.
Yeah, I think that really comes across. I'm just going to quickly jump in, and just because I don't know if everyone will understand Welsh, so I was just going to say hiraeth. It's this like Welsh word which describes a sense of longing, nostalgia, homesickness for a place or time that might no longer exist. So it tends to be quite a bittersweet feeling. So that's what that word really portrays, and I think in your poem that really comes across.
I feel like really strongly now, sort of like the nostalgia, but it was very bittersweet, and
Yeah.
it was quite strange, I guess, revisiting. I guess it was a massive juxtapositioning of the last time I was in Brecon, everything was fine in terms of
Yeah.
my family and health, and then now um, things have changed. So I think that was something I really wanted to communicate in my poem. And even though dementia is it's not like a fast, often it's been quite a slow process for my nan deteriorating. It
Mm.
felt like a massive shift in my life when, one like I went away, and then I came home and my world was different. And my
Mm.
grandparents, they were my best friends really, because my mum was working so much when I was young. I was really grateful to have my grandparents spend a lot of time raising me. It's one of my favorite poems I think I've written, just because even though I feel sad reflecting how things are now, I feel really happy. Um, because when I wrote that, I felt really happy because I had to look at the times before when we'd gone to
Yeah.
Kraken and had so many fun times. So yeah, it was really wonderful for me to actually kind of um look past kind of like the sadness that I kind of feel now towards how my nan is with
Mm.
her dementia, and to just put myself back into like a younger Morgan when I was a child, and my grandparents were looking after me. We made all these great memories in Brecon.
And I think in your poem that really comes across. It's especially with, as you say, with your nan, the fact that you went on the Camino and then you came back, she had the stroke, and then now she's got this dementia. It's this reflection on the version of your nan that you had growing up as a child versus the version that you have now with the dementia. And obviously, as you know, I've with my nan, I've had the same thing that I've gone through, where my nan had dementia as well. It's such a difficult thing to experience, where you have those memories of them from who they were before and then who they are now. And I think all that reflection really came through so beautifully in your poem. We can really see that relationship that you had with your nan. And one of the things that really strikes me when you read it is, at the beginning where you talk about her and how she was cooking and she was teaching you to cook, and she was, you were peeling the potatoes and she always finished first and helps you out and finishes them, versus now that she's obviously got dementia and you're there with her, with your Bampy, helping him to cook the way that she likes it. It's that kind
Yeah,
of the shift in roles that you've sort of had as this has developed, if that makes sense.
yeah, I would say that feels like a funny thing. Um,
Mm.
I can remember my nan looked after me and cared for me as a child, and the other day we went for a Joe's ice cream, and um, I was like, holding my nan's arm because she can't walk that fast anymore. And when we were going across the road, then it felt strange um, to realize that like I'm there comforting my nan like with my presence now.
Yeah,
It felt similar to, when I was a child. Um, my nan always had super warm hands. And
yeah,
when my nan held my hand, she kind of gave me a smile. It was like, "Oh, you've got warm hands," and it was kind of funny, sort of the how it's flipped. I always thought my nan was the best cook. I'm biased, of course, but I thought she was the best cook because she always put so much love and
mm,
care into her food. And if you visited, you were kind of getting out by the skin of your teeth if you left with like some sandwiches wrapped up for today and tomorrow. She was such a feeder. She loved cooking for people. So cooking for my nan now, and I'm really grateful. I don't think I'll ever really be able to, I don't think it's like a debt, but like repay the care that my grandparents have given me over the years of the love. So I'm getting a bit emotional, but I think it's nice to pay a little bit back, and especially with like my nan, it's strange now with the dementia, like your taste has changed and stuff, but I enjoy cooking and it's nice to be able to cook for her and cook things how she likes. And yeah, it's just a small thing I can do, I guess.
It really comes across how much you care about your nan. And I think you say about it being a debt that you feel like you can't repay. And I don't know, I feel like it's just with grandparents' love and a parent's love, it does feel like sometimes it's a debt that you can't repay. And it's a matter of, the little parts of them that come through in you, in the different things that you do, the ways you act, the things you say, the part of them that is then embedded in you and that you'll then pass on, if you ever have children and stuff like that. It's if you have kids, it'll be the part of your nan where you cook her you cook potatoes the way that she taught you and stuff like that. So it's just that continuation of the family line that they've passed on and now runs through you, and you get to give that back to them. You get to give them back everything that they taught you.
And I think a big aspect of this poem that I kind of wanted to maybe share was how my relationship with my grandparents has changed now. My grandparents, my nan, she doesn't leave the house anymore.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, she was such an active member of like our local community. And whether she was out the house doing something, she used to play bowls, or there'd be people visiting. And now I think for me, I realized I bring like a lot of joy to my grandparents when I visit them, and I tell them, they're like, "Oh, what have you been up to?" And I say like, "Oh, this weekend I was up in Scotland hiking, and it was great," and stuff like that. So I kind of think that's a way for me to kind of like pay it forward as well, because I know my grandparents have always wanted me to be happy and to live my life. So it's kind of I always feel like that's a conflict for me, because I want to kind of help out as much, but equally I think it's kind of difficult to, and I think maybe I help equally as much by them knowing I'm happy and living my life and kind of sharing these different adventures I've been on and taking lots of pictures and making memories, because my grandparents, they're not really making a lot of memories anymore. Yeah.
I think that's a really beautiful way of looking at it. I can really see how much love you have for them, how much love they must have for you. It's absolutely beautiful.
Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's something I've been really looking forward to for ages, and yeah, I'm really excited to see like how the podcast grows and evolves. And I hope we're going to see some of your work in future episodes too as well.
Thank you. Yes,
Sorry,
I'm so
you
grateful.
In a hot seat.
I know. I'm really grateful to have you on today. I've been really excited to do this episode with you, so I'm glad that I finally managed to pin down a date that we can both do. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been really lovely chatting with you, and thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing such a beautiful poem with us. It's absolutely incredible.
Thank you so much again for joining us, and thank you everyone for listening to this episode of the Unrehearsed Verse Poetry Podcast. We have new episodes on the way, so be sure to follow us on our socials and check out our new website, which is tagged below. Until next time.